Okay, welcome guests. Ruth Ann, we're ready when you are.
Thank you, Anna. This is a public meeting of the Indiana Arts Commission Arts in the Parks and Historic Sites 2019 Advisory Review Panel, Individuals number 3. I am Ruth Ann Calling, Jeffersonville Commissioner. Today is November 8th, and we are meeting by conference call and streaming live from a webinar. We welcome applicants who may be listening in today and would like to remind you that you are muted for this review. There is no direct contact or conversation about the evaluation and disposition of applications either before, during, or after the panel meeting. At this time, I would like for the panelists and staff to introduce themselves, stating their name, occupation, and where you are from in the state. Rhonda, will you please start us?
Sure. I'm Rhonda Deeg. I work as Director of Programs for Historic Madison, Inc. in Madison, Indiana, Jefferson County.
Okay, Lou.
I'm Terry Lou Adler. I'm a retired landscape architect, currently working as an artist fabricating functional art from gourds from Madison, Indiana, Jefferson County.
Thank you. Vicki?
My name is Vicki Graber. I'm a folk artist specializing in willow basket weaving, fourth generation weaver from Goshen, Indiana.
Thank you. Stephen?
Yeah, Steve Hayes, Executive Director of Hayes Arboretum in Richmond, Indiana.
Thank you. Haskell?
Haskell Schaefer. I'm a freelance photographer currently residing in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Chris?
Hello, my name is Chris Stice, and I am the Deputy Director for the Hamilton County Parks and Recreation Department.
Thank you. Anna?
I'm Anna Trageser, Artist and Community Services Manager at the Indiana Arts Commission. And
Chapin Schnick, former art teacher, but now working for the Arts Commission.
Hey, thank you all. Appreciate that. Now we'll begin the panel review. This is how the process will work. I will announce the application we will review and ask the first reader to begin the discussion. The first reader will provide their assessment of the application based upon the evaluation criteria and their perspective. Panelists, please note that the applications do not need to be recapped since everyone has read it. Just provide your comments. After the first reader is finished, I will ask the second reader to present any new, additional, or opposing comments. We are not looking for consensus, just a full evaluation from the different perspectives that you, the panelists, bring to the table. After the second reader has finished, I will open the discussion for final comments. Remember, in the interest of time, we are only looking for new, additional, or opposing viewpoints. If a panelist has a conflict of interest, that panelist will be placed on hold while the application is reviewed. However, if there are no conflicts of interest in this panel, there are none, in other words. Sorry. Finally, once the application has been reviewed by the full panel, we ask the panel to update their scores in the online system. It is common for scores to change as a result of this broader discussion. These scores save automatically. Are there any questions?
No.
No.
I forgot to mention, if you would please keep yourself on mute while you're not speaking. That way we can cut down on background noise.
Anyone else with a question? Let's begin then. We'll start with the application from Benjamin Taylor. The first reader is Haskell.
All right. I think this was overall a strong application. I like the idea of Mr. Taylor drawing from his own experiences, wanting to compose pieces for that to be performed in the park, and just making a concert of this setting to be accessible for families. He mentioned how a lot of concerts of this degree are usually not welcoming to smaller children, given the concert etiquette that follows. So I like how he included that into his application. One of the things that was a bit unclear for me was exactly how long the concert would conclude. I know he said 3 to 5 minutes for the pieces, but I think I'm a bit unclear as to how many pieces would be composed, as well as the other director who will be helping with his own pieces. He'll be contributing to the concert as well. And another thing that I was unclear on was just basically the artist compensation. I'm not too familiar with how much composers get paid for composing such pieces, but I just noticed a lump sum of it going towards the artists themselves. I think there could have been more involvement as far as the marketing, because I just feel there's more opportunity for marketing to have been done. So, yeah.
Thank you, Haskell. Our second reader is Vicki.
I agree with Haskell on a lot of those things. Visualizing symphonic music in nature seems like a really natural match to me. That's what attracted me to giving this positive remarks. And seems like the application and the implementation of it is very well planned out. I don't have any disagreements with what Haskell said.
Thank you, Vicki. Any new, additional, or opposing comments? None being noted, I'll ask you to please. Sure, go ahead.
Oh, no, actually, never mind. I apologize.
I would just like to mention that I think this really would be, this program would be very helpful if a free copy for each student musician could be developed, maybe in a CD format or something, so that they could use it as in their portfolio later on down the road. I think this would be a wonderful program for that. And also, I feel this would be a perfect opportunity for to mentor maybe one of the high school musicians and bring them along during the experience of writing this music. I just see that then they could also learn how to write the music, visiting that site, getting the inspiration, and being involved with writing or composing that music as well, and maybe allow them to experience that and incorporate that in this job shadowing, sort of like a small internship along with this project.
Thank you. Anyone else care to comment? In that case, I'll ask you to please finalize your scores, update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. All right, our next applicant is Clare Longendyke. Our first reader is Steve.
It took me a minute to unmute there. My comments was that the project seemed very feasible and achievable. The project seemed to be a good fit for Brown County State Park and the available resources. The budget appeared to be appropriate, income and expenses were explained, and the artist's resume supported the project. The project was very considerate of the natural environment. The project application articulated the significance of the site. The project did well to consider the capacity of the park and complemented the park activities. It demonstrated a good willingness to engage the community. I really liked how they were making their own instruments. This project aims at a strong audience engagement through active participation. Project application seeks inclusion, and an audience was identified. The marketing plan to attract the intended audience was outlined, and
Is that it, Stephen?
and scope of the project. The experience of the people involved show their ability to successfully complete the project. And those were my comments. I think my connection was a bit unstable for a second. Did everybody still get it?
I
Yes.
think so. You started up again, so.
All right, we'll move ahead then to our second reader, Terry Lou. Terry, you there?
Sorry, forgot to unmute. So I share many of his accolades for the project, but I do have some concerns that may vary. I thought that their schedule was a bit too tight, that they had an awful lot that they had to do in a relatively short period of time. And so I was concerned that they would actually not be able to complete that, which made me concerned that they hadn't done this before, so they weren't sure how long it would take. It's an outdoor program in May, and so I was concerned that there is no contingency for weather, which could be a definite possibility. Would it just be canceled, or would they have an alternate venue where they could perform? Consistently across many of the applications, there seemed to be some confusion about how to plug their numbers into the budgets, and the way that the application is laid out. That probably is not their fault. It's possibly needs a little better instructions. Unlike our first reader, I had a lot of concerns about the environmental impact. It's a state park, and to turn people loose to go gather their own noisemakers does not seem to be environmentally sensitive. I appreciate that the naturalists would be giving them a little program of what to avoid and so on, but as a landscape architect, my experience has been that you need more than a little 5-minute thing. I think perhaps that this could be prevented by the artist collecting a variety of materials with the naturalist participation, and then people, choose from the things that have already been selected. I think this would also help them manage their time better. Public benefit, I'm not sure I agree that Brown County, Nashville, and Bloomington are particularly underserved, but certainly the fact that the concert is free is open to anyone who can afford the admission to the park. And I think that's primarily what my concerns were. I think that the program has great potential for the future with a few refinements.
Thank you, Terry Lou. Are there any new, additional, or opposing comments? In that case, I'll ask you to please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. We'll move ahead to applicant Debra Silvert. Our first reader is Rhonda.
Yes. This South Shore Suite interactive concert experience, I felt it was very feasible for this particular, we're talking about Gene Stratton Porter and the Limberlost Parks. This social media campaign is very interesting to me, and it very interactive, educational experience. It ties very well with the nature and Indiana themes, which I felt was very, very good for this particular state park. Other than that, that's what I have.
Okay, thank you, Rhonda. Our second reader will be Chris.
Hello, my name is Chris Stice, and my reading is on the narrative of his application. There are a few highlights that I made that stood out to me. The harmonic progressions used to provoke certain kinds of emotions. In today's world of anxiety, stress, I think that he is touching on an important component of reaching children's emotions, and through music and the arts, I think he identifies in his narratives of some new and ways of trying to reach them, both through some of his social media marketing plans of how to reach individuals, of asking questions, and then also integrating those sites into marketing other historical sites as well, and cross-generating some communications between parks and the social media pages. He's also identified some of YouTube sites as well, and I also think he's taking a play of the Experience Music Project in Seattle, which is sort of like the ICE or sort of interactive concert experience, which is referred to as ICE. So I think there's some correlation that could get some recognition that might bring attendance or an audience to it that might be new.
Thank you, Chris. I will note that you kept referring to he, and our applicant is a she. We'll move on.
Sorry.
Ask for new, additional, or opposing comments.
I just have a quick question for all the panelists. Would somebody mind explaining to me what exactly the interactive experience is? I read through it quite a few times, and I feel like I'm not quite grasping what exactly is taking place during the concert. Throughout the other avenues of the application, I feel, is very in line with what the application is asking for. I think just the proposed project itself, I'm just having a bit of a hard time comprehending or envisioning what is going to be taking place during this concert. I see the thing about the script, but I'm just wondering what exactly is taking place with the script.
Someone care to respond?
I kind of saw something similar, and that would be under the public benefit and community impact. I was wondering if the project may be able to engage the audiences more effectively, and specifically how the engagement was through participation, because I'm kind of like Haskell, where I was struggling a little bit to see the engagement.
Yeah, this is Terry Lou, and I would agree with both. I think that the application was so wordy that it was almost impossible to find some of the answers, and perhaps that's why we're not seeing where the interaction is.
I also struggled in my comments. I struggled with seeing the specific target audience. I don't know if anybody else had that reaction.
Yes.
Additional comments? None being noted, I'm going to ask you now to please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. Our next applicant is Denise Wilson, and our first reader is Terry Lute, please.
I thought that this applicant did a really good job explaining, it seemed to be my thing, a contingency plan for being outside. They had a plan in case of rain. I thought that the proposal was nicely laid out without a lot of extra words, and so it was very simple to find the answers to the things that were being asked. She did have a bit of problem getting her numbers correct between, you know, what was the grant request and the in-kind, but that seems to be consistent with other applications. While the proposal does not have a particular element directed to the underserved, it was inclusive. So I thought that was a positive for the application. I was concerned about the reliance on Eventbrite for their marketing. I thought this could be potentially off-putting to those who don't want to enter their email for more, thinking they're going to get more junk mail. For those who don't use electronics, especially the older population, and might potential attendees think they cannot attend if they do not register with Eventbrite, because that's how you usually buy a ticket. So I think that perhaps alternate sources for marketing might be considered. I would like to see within the programs a bit more explanation at the concerts regarding why the pieces are significant historically, not just that they are.
Before we move on, Terry Lou, would you mind clarifying some of the problems you saw with the budget?
With the budget? Yes, let me. So under, at the very beginning, the request, grant amount requested is $3,000. Okay. And then we go back to the budgets. Project expenses. Apologize while I scroll through here and I'm reminded. And I'm on a really slow internet. So she has listed a variety of in-kind contributions that were not included in her totals.
And where are you seeing that? Sorry.
Under in-kind detail, total in-kind, you know, towards the bottom of the application, right above cultural asset.
Mm-hmm. I see that as
and so,
NA and 0. Is that what you're looking at also?
No, I see, am I on the right application? This is Traveler's Dream, right? Concert, number 4.
We are on Dianna Davis, Crafting Music in the Trees.
Oh, I so apologize. I was on Denise Wilson.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, that's helpful feedback for Denise Wilson. Maybe
yeah,
if it's okay, could we have Terry Lou share? Are we on Denise Wilson?
Am I wrong?
We are on Denise Wilson.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Goodness. All right. I'm
Freak
sorry.
me out.
All right, move on without me. I'll catch up to you.
So it was just the same problem with how you have asked for expenses and income to be reflected. You know, it's confusing, I think, to the applicants of where they add the in-kind and so on. So that was the only, the total request is actually $3,200, including the in-kind contributions, not the $3,000.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry Lou. Our second reader is Haskell.
So overall, I feel like it's a pretty strong application. I'd like to piggyback on the Eventbrite in terms of marketing, just my experience with it. I would also encourage to explore other opportunities of marketing. Eventbrite is good to gauge a general number of attendance, but again, in terms of different people using different platforms of technology, I think it's good to kind of hit on all different avenues. One other recommendation, I'm currently scrolling through to try to find the marketing plan again. So you got posters, Facebook, emails, newspaper, and yeah, I probably wouldn't sit on Eventbrite too much and to rely on that too much, but to really just kind of communicate that it is open attendance, like you're not required to have a ticket or a sign-in or something like that. But overall, I love how the applicant is really pairing their knowledge with the history of the state of Indiana and just pairing that with their skill set and the park that they are proposing to do the project at.
Thank you, Pascal. I'll ask the rest of you for any new, additional, or opposing comments, please.
I will go back to the budget. I'm sorry, I hope I'm on the same page now, but I do believe that she's done that as we've asked to not include the in-kind items in either the projected expense detail or total expenses, nor the project income detail or the total income, but we have asked them to report that separately. So I hope that's helpful. I understand it's always confusing for people.
Right there. Anyone else? Okay. None being noted, I'll ask you to please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. Our next applicant is Dianna Davis, and our first reader is Vicki, please.
Yes, I felt this is a very strong application. I think collaborating with an already established program that they have at Mississinawa and Salamone is a really good idea. You have an audience from past events that hopefully will want to return. I like that it's addressing real life issues with the bees and floods that Teresa will be talking about. They have had to deal with flooding in those parks in the recent years, and so to be able to even see it firsthand would, I feel like, have a really good impact on an audience there. And I like that the approach to this whole event is unassuming in that you can take away whatever you get from it. It's, I don't know, not necessarily targeted to make you feel something, but just raise an awareness. And I like she has experience on her side presenting past workshops. And also, I think it's a good thing to repeat this activity, because the more people that take the attend the event and learn about it can share it with their friends and can get more people to come to it that way and get more visitors to the park. The only critique I had, I guess, is just, and maybe she's done this, is for Dianna to possibly contact music teachers in schools in this area to maybe get students to be aware of this program and its availability.
All right, thank you. Our second reader is Stephen.
Yeah, I agree. Very strong application. Only a couple other things that I saw. I really liked that the program was multiple days, so a total of 4 days. I thought that was very nice. I also liked that the budget and included $1,600 or $1,610 in addition to the $3,000. I'm not sure if that $1,600 should be under in-kind, but either way, it puts the total up at $4,610, which was also nice to see. And then the pictures she included, I thought were really descriptive to what she was talking about. So I enjoyed seeing those as well. So thank you.
Yes, this is definitely where I can provide some clarity on the budget. I was looking at this last application, as you remember. We have the way that we've asked people to report in kind is a little confusing, and maybe not as you would do it in other areas. So we've asked folks to report in kind as anything that is contributed to the project by anyone other than themselves. So she's included it in as part of her income because it is being contributed by herself and therefore is non-in kind by our definition.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
Can you clarify that again? Are you saying that the in-kind in this particular application is provided by the applicant?
By our definition of in-kind, there's no
in-kind here in this one.
Yep, she's followed our definition of in-kind and did not report in-kind there. So if it's contributed by her, we do not consider it in-kind. It has to be contributed by someone else.
Right. Okay. Okay. I was a little bit confused with this one because I felt that some of the project expenses could be in kind, and maybe then other expenses could be used. It could be the funding could be used for something else. Things like pencils and those types of things could be in kind or donated by. So I'm hoping I'm not confusing the issue.
I think I understand you're suggesting to her that perhaps she seek some kind of in-kind contribution for some of those items.
For some of the items, right? The tape, scissors, those types of art supplies that are easily donated by people, or others might have some of that. That was the only comment I had, other than the fact that I feel that this might be a really good program to offer monthly in the park. It just seems like as the park has different programs going on, that each month new campers come in, and I really like the idea of this being marketed to campers, because many times campers, I know in Clifty Park and Madison, the campers are often, they don't know what's going on within the park. So I really like this idea that the campers are being involved, but then maybe offer this as a monthly program.
Additional comments from anyone? All right, I'm going to ask you now to please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. All right, we'll move ahead to our next applicant, who is Henry Craig Brenner, and our first reader is Chris.
Hello again. My name is Chris Stice. I'm the first reader for Mr. Henry Craig Brenner's application for Craig Brenner's Presents Music in the State Parks and Historical Sites. In reviewing his application, it seemed very thorough, and in just some highlights of my reading, it felt that having Mr. Brenner applying for multiple park presentations and performances at different state parks was unique. And going to Clifty Falls, Pokagon, Spring Mill, and Turkey Run, and had visited most of those sites prior to his performances and applications. So I thought that was nice to know. I felt that his participation with the audience of providing them instruments to play along, both well, at all ages. He would encourage those to participate. I felt that his expense detail was pretty accurate for budgeting purposes for the market to date that I find in the Parks and Rec field. I also liked the site significance description, where he stated he'd highlight some important Indiana artists whose art was shaped by the Indiana origins, and he gave an example of that. He also identified on the site impacts some park history, and also the ultimate importance of the obligation to take care of our natural beauty in each parks. Another note that I thought was important in his application was his documentation of public participation and underserved populations, some of his background in reaching those with disabilities, and his work in a former position at the city of Bloomington could be of benefit trying to reach different demographics and target markets. I thought that was nice to see. The other thing was in his marketing plan, I think he got that each park property is operated a little differently, and each park property would be marketed a little differently, with working with each staff by their park calendars and their media releases and custom-made flyers to try to reach different attendees at each park. With that, concludes my summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Our second reader is Rhonda.
Yes, this is Rhonda D. I concur with Chris. I really like the idea of having this at 3 different parks. Again, it's spreading the program around, and that's really important for educational purposes. See, I had a note here about demonstrating the instruments and how they're used. I would need that myself, and I think that's really neat, and actually having the participants do that, and then inviting the parents of children to take photographs, and that again is documentation for portfolios and future documentation later. I did have a couple of questions on, there's no, of course, in kind here, and I didn't see a budget for printing the flyers and the surveys and that kind of thing. And I and maybe I missed it, but I didn't see how long each performance was to be. Other than that, I concur with Chris.
Thank you, Rhonda. Opening the floor for additional, new, or opposing comments.
This is Terry Lou. In general, I was concerned that his descriptions were too vague. You know, he used phrases like his band might perform. He didn't have real specific details on how the concerts would occur. And in fact, in reading some of the letters of support from the state parks, it sounded more like he's sitting in a corner in the hall outside the restaurant while people attend brunch. So I wasn't sure how much public involvement there truly would be. You know, just happened to be people walking by, and he had a pile of noisemakers with him that they could play if they chose. So I was uncomfortable that the community involvement was very strong. And to repeat, I thought that he was just too vague on how he would organize these concerts if he received the grant.
Thank you, Terry Lou. Additional comments? All right, I'll ask you now to please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time.
Just a reminder for everyone, 2 things. Remember to keep your applicant hat on, and make sure you're delivering your comments in a constructive way. So make suggestions or just watch your tone. And then in your comments, please make sure it's clear what criteria you are thinking of with your comments. So we want to make sure they're related back to those areas that this program is really evaluating.
Thank you, Anna. All right, I'm going to move ahead to applicant Julie Barber. Our first reader is Stephen.
Yeah, so under feasibility, my comment questioned the grant amount requested and the project income and expenses. There seemed to be a discrepancy, and the grant amount requested was $1,500, but the income and expenses was $2,035. So they were still within the $3,000 target range, but they just didn't all match up. So I noticed that. I think the application could be improved if they were all consistent. Because once you go through the project expense detail, they all do add up to that $2,035. Under the cultural asset and natural environmental impact, I didn't really see any ways for improvement. The applicant demonstrated a good history of positive performances and a good relationship with staff. Under the public benefit, I saw the applicant accomplished what she was seeking to accomplish and what the applicant was seeking to accomplish. So I didn't see any real room for improvement under public benefit and community impact. And then under the artistic quality, I saw that the artist's resume and the people involved showed their ability to successfully complete this project. I'm flipping through the application to see if I made any additional notes. The time frame seemed to be longer than others, and maybe that actually helps the feasibility, but that was another thing I noticed in the applicant. That's it. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Stephen. Our second reader is Chris.
I concur with Mr. Hayes' comments. Thank you very much. My name is Chris Stice, and I'm the second reader. And looking through this, one of the positive attributes for this application was the knowledge that the applicant was bringing to the table, Julie was bringing, of the park history and a performance of the 1930s era, and singing songs that would take people into a depression era, and also bringing a historical component that was identified in the site significance contributions to the park department and that specific park by the CCC and WPA in the buildings and the importance and their lasting infrastructure, as she is quoted there. I thought that was an important historical component that this application brings to the table. That concludes my assessment.
Thank you for that. I'll ask you now, panel, for any new, additional, or opposing comments. None being noted, I'll ask you now to finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. All right, moving ahead, we'll review applicant Leighann Ragusa, and our first reader is Rhonda.
This is Rhonda. I felt this sounds they left behind, music from the old world, and Indiana's New France is, aligns very, very well with Vincennes and the Vincennes State Parks. The feasibility was fantastic. Cultural asset was part of that. I felt that the application went very, very well with the program. I did, however, feel it was a little wordy, so I really had to read through it quite a few times to understand the three components, and I wasn't quite sure in regards to the reenactment part, if that meant that the presenters were in costume. However, if they weren't, that would be something that would add to this application. I also feel that filming this event would be really nice. Part of the funding should go into filming this program so that a DVD could be used in the local schools, because many schools and children may not be able to be involved with this and come out and see this, and I feel that would help. Teachers could use this in future when they are teaching about the history of Vincennes and incorporate that. So that would be my only suggestion.
Thank you, Rhonda. Mm-hmm. Our second reader is Haskell.
This is Haskell, and I pretty much agree with Rhonda in terms of the wordiness of the application. I had to read through a few times. As a creative, I can empathize with the difficult nature of trying to put vision to paper and words. So I understand that. Overall, in general, I believe it's a strong application. I really like the applicant's dedication to actually do the research to really delve in depth so that the music is paired properly with the sites that were chosen. I can appreciate that kind of passion and dedication that's being put into this project. Other than that, I don't believe I have any other critiques or comment. Again, I think it's a really strong application.
Thank you, Haskell. Additional comments, opposing or new comments?
Just one thing that I noticed in the application under engagement and participation, there was a handout, a one-page handout mentioned, and I thought that would be a real positive to enhancing the engagement of the audience, but it sounded as if they were uncertain whether the applicant was going to produce a handout or not. So hopefully they do decide to produce a handout.
Additional comments?
I would also concur with that too, because I think with this particular program, it really ties with the history of Vincennes, and a handout or something that again a student could take and maybe use later in their classroom. I went to see this program and now I have this information, and I could share that with my social studies class. I think that would be a plus.
Anyone else with comments?
My comment was along those lines as well too. With having the handout, it seems like with the short presentations, I like that because it's not a huge time commitment, and it gives the audience an introduction to, have a taste of this type of music, but then to have something concrete that they can take with them if they're further interested would be a good thing.
And that's kind of where I was going with a DVD too, because if you are filming this, it's something that could be used later as well.
Anything else that needs to be added or commented? All right, then I'll ask you to finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time.
You guys are doing great. Thank you so much. More than halfway through.
Our next applicant then will be Marjorie Rusche, and our first reader is Terry Lou. Terry Lou, do you need more time?
Sorry. No, I forgot a mute button again.
Okay.
I thought this was a very interesting application and a great opportunity for students in a rural setting. I thought that the premise does a great job integrating the historic site by focusing on Miss Porter's poetry. Some of my suggestions that I thought, because I'm an instrumentalist, it took me a while to figure out that this is perhaps choral composition, since most of the other applicants are, of course, instrumental. And so I think that perhaps that could have been a little clearer at the beginning that this is choral music. I thought that a suggestion for making this program even more beneficial would have been to schedule a concert that's open to the public where these compositions could perhaps be performed. There's no real community involvement other than with the students that are, the select students that are involved in this class. And I think that that might have given this program an even broader reach. Probably if I had to come up with probably one of my concerns is I thought that the funding request was a bit pricey of what the applicant is going to be compensated for, since she admits that much of her work are past compositions, that the things that she's presenting to the students are not necessarily newly created. So since this is a repeat application, you know, she's going to be using some of those past things. Otherwise, though, overall, I thought it was a very interesting opportunity for students interested in both Porter and how to compose music.
Thank you, Terry Lou. Our second reader will be Vicki.
I was impressed that this is a program that I think has been done before, that has established precedents where students create, you know, the songs based on an Indiana celebrity, so to speak. And I am impressed with Marjorie's experience and focus on Jean Porter, and have no doubt of her abilities. My reservations come with feeling like, I was trying to go back to feeling like what it's like to be a high school student, and it felt like the focus was on a particular accelerated class. And I know she mentioned that everyone is welcome, but yet at that time in your life in high school, you're probably a little bit more reluctant to be involved with something that you know is already geared toward, you know, someone else who is in an accelerated class. I'd like to see it maybe feel more welcoming and open to more students.
Thank you, Vicki. Any new, additional, or opposing comments?
I think this is probably along the same lines as Vicki. I would like to hear more about public participation in underserved populations. And then also under engagement and participation, I thought the application could better explain how the audience would be engaged in the performance.
Thank you. Additional comments?
I'd like to comment. This is Rhonda. As a past high school teacher, first of all, I really like this marrying this music composition with the park. However, I also agree with some of the comments that have been made by the panelists. I think that the students should take maybe this back to their school and perform it at the school, or provide an exhibit in the hallway to further educate the other students. So engaging more students involved with this, other than the specific classes that will be attending and going to the park, but bringing it back to the school and having some type of public presentation would be, now we're educating a lot of people. I also am not quite sure about the budget. Maybe it's just me. I see travel expense to and from South Bend, and I believe that's for the bus, or is that for the applicant for $150? And I know that with working with the schools I'm working with, there's the problem with trying to get the bus paid and the bus driver paid and that type of thing. And if that is really involved with this line item here, and if it is, I'd like to see that budget bulleted a little bit better. Other than that, I really like the fact that it's marrying and bringing students involved with this. And many students don't get to go out into the and even visit parks. So this is just, I concur, it's a great application.
Thank you. Additional comments? All right, I'll move ahead and ask you to finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. Moving ahead, our next applicant is Nicole Williams, and our first reader is Haskell.
This is Haskell, and I feel like this was a strong application. As far as feasibility, I really like that it serves the park well, but is like there's a targeted demographic that the applicant is seeking to reach in terms of cultural asset and natural environment impact. The applicant showed a high degree of awareness and desire to draw more visitors to the park, and has solicited feedback from the site staff. I feel like the applicant's really capitalizing on the feedback that was given and just pairing their service with the project in service to the park. And I also like the applicant's mindfulness of not wanting to compete with the other events that are taking place in the park. That was one thing that was given as feedback from the site staff, and so I can appreciate that in the applicant's planning that was being implemented. I feel like marketing efforts could have a bit of a greater reach. Understanding the targeted demographic, that being considered, I believe there's other avenues that could be explored in terms of flyers or reaching out to other organizations out locally. And I believe that the applicant's background directly reflects, in terms of their involvement with the community, the project that's being proposed and the passion that is backing what is being proposed. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, Haskell. Our second reader is Stephen.
Yes, I agree with Haskell. Very strong application. And my one suggestion would be in the grant request amount, it's so close to $3,000, it's only $50 off, to take it up to $3,000 and take that $50 and apply it to marketing, similar to what Haskell suggested, but maybe a marketing plan could include direct efforts to the target audience through the school systems or a similar method.
Thank you, Stephen. Any additional new or opposing comments? None being noted, I'll ask you now to finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time, please. Our next applicant will be Paula Chambers, and our first reader is Chris.
Hello, my name is Chris Stice. I'm the first reader for Forgotten Forest. In reviewing this application, for McCormick's Creek State Park. This was a hoop performance, and there was a description that identifies she will do a performance, and then she will have a question and answering period following her performance, and also provide 30 hoops for those adults or children to learn how to perform the hoop. And as I have read through this application a couple times, in the description, it identifies some of her past experiences, which are of over 40 years of experience with this. And just looking through this even more, the project expense details shows some expense rentals, equipment, and social media. My concern is she's requesting $3,000 and her stipend for her artist expenses of $2,350. It identifies in the project management of how they would help other individuals to accomplish, manage, and implement this project. There's a choreography time and space rental prior to that, but it doesn't identify any of those details in the project expenses. That would be relevant for a project stipend of that rate for this type of an artist in this market that I find. This was a I'll just end with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Our second reader will be Terry Lou.
I concur with much of what Chris has said. To start with a negative, because the budget's what he last talked about. I guess I just assumed that the $2,350 was going to compensate her for the studio rental and so on. So I wasn't too worried about it being terribly specific. But I do also now see that I wish that some of that had been better itemized under the budget. To take it back to the beginning, though, in general, I thought this was a great application. I thought that the answers to the questions were very succinct and very specific, so it was very easy to understand what her plan was, what her goals were, and who she intended to engage. Very inclusive because, she comes with hoops and attempts to teach other people to become hoop dancers. Only negative on any of that is, again, if it rains, what is the contingency plan? I think perhaps she might have be nice if it was more than just the one performance. I would like to see it happening a bit more frequently, especially for the value of the stipend that she's requesting.
Thank you, Terry Lou. Any additional or new or opposing comments?
I'm not sure if this has already been said because my feed was breaking up, but the rain date, I heard something about a rain date. I thought maybe that could be included in the project start date and end date, so it was a wider time frame than just that one day of October 19th, if they included a rain day. And then I thought some of the areas in the application could be elaborated on, such as the cultural asset and natural environment impact. because I felt the applicant could mention the impacts to the staff, even though they might be very minimal. I think the impacts could include those to operations. So I think there were a couple areas could elaborate, maybe in public benefit and community impact, talking more about the engagement and participation, specifically regarding the questions and answer sessions after the performance. And those are my comments.
Thank you. Additional comments?
This is Rhonda. I concur also with the expense details. I would like to see that a little bit further explored and justified a little bit better here. Comment. See, I'm trying to see where I had my comments here. Maybe with the expenses and the funding, allow some funds for to create a takeaway for people. This really focuses on health and exercise, and if I were to be involved with the program, I would want to be able to maybe do this at home later or in the future. So I would want some type of takeaway that I could refer to later. And I also would like to suggest that possibly maybe the local health hospital or institutions be involved with this. Many of them have programs where they offer free programs to people, and they would be a great way maybe to market this particular project.
Thank you, Rhonda. Additional comments? None being noted, I'll ask you to please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. Our next applicant is Tom Roznowski, and our first reader is Vicki.
Yes, what I focused on mostly in this, what stood out to me in this application is how Tom was going to specialize each event to the site that the performance takes place. I think that makes it very special for the locals that attend. So paying special attention to the history of each venue is really important, I think. And I also think it's important that it seems like Tom has a rare art form, storytelling music that I think needs to have a lot of exposure to the general public. It's one of those things that's in danger of being lost, which is kind of close to my heart because that's kind of what I deal with in my art. And in watching his performances on what he posted in his application, I got the feeling that he just has this easygoing attitude that would make for a really enjoyable, relaxing evening, which I think is one of the reasons people go to the parks, to get away from their real world, so to speak, and just relax and, decompress. So that's what I liked about it.
Thank you, Vicki. I'll move on to our second reader, Rhonda.
Let me see here. I want to make sure I'm on. I really don't have many comments other than very positive. I also concur. I feel this Hoosier Roots is something that we need more of, and a program like this. Again, I'm still going to focus on, and I hate to be a record here, focusing on schools. This is another good program where children can be involved, and we can bring about our historical sites and their architectural features with this program, focusing on the Hoosier roots.
Thank you, Rhonda. I'll ask for new, additional, or opposing comments.
One thing that I saw was under public benefit and community impact, and this is kind of along the same lines that were recently mentioned. I thought the audience could be engaged with an opportunity to interact and participate in the performance, and in order to engage the public to acquire the knowledge or skills in the arts.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Additional comments?
I would agree with that. My impression is that as he's performing, he awaits the audience to approach him for the engagement rather than him having activities that would encourage that engagement. And often audience members are too bashful or shy, or think that it's not really that welcome to approach the performer. So I think if he could just incorporate something within his performances that was a bit welcoming, and some activity that would encourage participation, would make the program even better.
Thank you. Additional comments?
This is Haskell here. I agree. I believe the application overall was strong in general. A few comments or critiques would be in regards to the marketing and soliciting feedback. I see that he listed his website and Facebook and the amount of followers, and there's a plan to reach out to the local radio broadcast studios. I probably would have liked to have seen a little more effort in terms of marketing. Again, like social media just it's not a solid route, just given different demographics and just people you're trying to reach in general. So not to focus too heavily on a person's own following or the efforts of others, but just really sticking your hand out there with probably flyers or something like that. And the other would just be getting feedback. I didn't really see anything, again, having some sort of activity that solicits feedback or some sort of participation. I didn't really see anything about how he's going to really evaluate the project. Other than that, again, strong application.
Thank you, Haskell. Any other new comments?
This is probably very minor. Maybe it was already mentioned, but the grant amount requested was $2,950, but income and expenses had $3,000.
Thank you. Additional comments? I'll ask you to please finalize your scores and update your online comments now, please. Let me know if you need more time. Move ahead to our next applicant, who is Tomas Lozano, and our first reader is Stephen.
Yes, under the feasibility, I saw that the applicant met the requirements, and the locations picked, the mansions seemed, both mansions seemed like they were well suited for what the applicant intended to do. Under the cultural asset and natural environment impacts, I thought the applicant could be more considerate of the natural and cultural environments by indicating the impacts to the historic site staff. And under the public benefit and community impact, in reviewing the application, I really desired to know more. So the applicant talked briefly about the Latin American population, but I was wanting to know more about how the performance was really tying in to that community. And then, let's see, my specific comments were: the application could better explain and clearly define the public benefit and community impact. The application could better define the target audience and how they would be engaged. And then the marketing plan could be enhanced to be specific to the audience. And the application could better define the evaluation process. The application mentioned relying on historic site staff to keep track of the audience members, which would be an impact. So that might reflect, I saw it as being kind of relevant in two areas, I guess, the cultural asset and natural environment impact, and then the public benefit and community impact. And those were the two areas I saw that could be improved. Those are my comments. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. We'll move on to our second reader, Haskell.
Haskell, I agree with a lot of the points that Steve made. I'll just go ahead and start with feasibility. I don't know about anyone else, but as far as the income requested, asking for the full amount, I see that full amount is just being dispensed amongst the three musicians. I personally don't know what is appropriate as far as a rate in that terms, but I personally would have liked to have seen more of a detailed breakdown in regards to what those expenses are going to. I see that there's a general explanation of, covering rehearsal and travel, but in terms of showing some project management, I would have just liked to have seen that broken down a little more to just have a better understanding of how those funds are being used and distributed. I like the applicant's desire to just reach within their own community as well as provide a benefit for the community around them. I think personally, I could have appreciated a better explanation as to the relevance of the music to the sites that were chosen. That's just my own takeaway from that portion. In terms of public benefit and community impact, again, I kind of suggest Eventbrite being a good tool, but it should not be the end-all be-all to any sort of marketing material. It's just one way to gauge numbers and the track numbers, but even then, you get a lot of people who RSVP and then they don't show up. Kind of pairing with Steve in terms of relying on the staff to track the number of participants, maybe incorporate another way to better gauge that from the applicant standpoint. Other than that, I think that kind of ends all my comments.
Thank you, Haskell. Any other new additional or opposing comments?
This is Rhonda here. I'd like to concur with both Stephen and Haskell on this. Knowing Lanier Mansion and understanding a little bit about the staff there's very little staff there, and relying on them would be kind of tough to do any kind of surveying or keeping track of audience and that type of thing. I also found it, I'd like to see a little bit more relevance to the Lanier and Culbertson Mansion. I didn't see that very well in the feasibility. I'd like to explore that a little bit more. How is this Latin American music, this program relevant, and how can it tie better in with the history of both of those mansions? In the last comment, or I guess I've got a couple more, I would suggest this program would really tie in with the Hispanic festival that we have in Madison, and maybe partner the Hispanic festival with Lanier so that those two are together and offer this program at that time, because I think you would have two areas in Madison where people can walk to, or we can take the Hispanic festival down to Lanier. I mean, it just makes sense to me there to tie those two together, and maybe the applicant didn't know that Madison has that. And then also, I would like to see, again, a breakdown of expenses. Other than that, that's it.
Thank you. Additional comments?
This is Terry Lou. I'm in line with the comments to date. The only one I would like to add had to do with community involvement. I don't consider it serving the underserved by charging admission to attend the concerts. In his explanation, he said that the venue fees would be waived in lieu of admission paid by attendees. Well, that's a benefit to him, but it's not a benefit to the audience. So I think that he ought to reconsider that piece, and perhaps part of the stipend that is slotted for the musicians should go towards renting the space and the facilities so that the concerts can be free to the public.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Terry Lou. Additional comments? None being noted, I'll ask you to please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time.
Sorry to jump back in. I was just thinking through this because it has come to my attention since in between the time that this application was due and now that there's some confusion among the historic sites and some park sites about whether admission into their site is required or not. And so I know that we will be working through that with our partners, Historic Site and Department of Natural Resources. So I think I just want you to know that in lieu of that conversation, that it's not clear among the sites right now about what kind of admission should be charged for these programs. It's all the clarity I can provide you there, but.
Thank you, Anna. Give you a couple more seconds here to wrap that up. All right, I'm going to move ahead to our final applicant, Tamara Loewenthal, and our first reader is Vicki.
Being a physical education major in college, what I love about this application is that it makes exercise fun, and that's just what we really strive for as far as continuing fitness throughout your life, is to do things that are fun. And it feels like Tamara has done a lot of this, like she's conducted classes or workshops, and people seem to really feel at ease being able to do this if that's their thing. I like that it's at McCormick's Creek. That seems to be a place that draws a lot of musical things, musical events to it. So it's known for that. So I think an audience will be ready to go. One thing I have questions about is, or what I would like to hear more about is, she keeps referencing that it's a Hoosier tradition, and I want to know what's deeper than that. Like, what part of the Hoosier culture does clogging come from? The ethnic background. To hear more about the cultural benefits. And yes, there are some. She mentioned some areas of influence, but I would like to hear more about more educational information about how those cultures are connected to clogging, how it came to Indiana previously to immigrants coming to Indiana. So my curiosity has been piqued, and I would love to see her delve more into explaining more of that about the style of dance. But I really like that. I think that exercise and being at the park go hand in hand. So I really like that aspect of it.
Thank you, Vicki. Our second reader is Terry Lou.
I thought this was a great application in that she, again, very clearly stated goals and what her project was. So it was very easy to follow. I appreciated that even though it's a repeat application, she's done it in the past, she has learned from her previous experiences and modified this and improved this, taking into account the things that she learned in the past. Very, very inclusive. I love that there are, classes beforehand and then the dance is later, so that people can feel a little bit more comfortable in the dancing, and you actually get to dance more rather than the entire dance time being spent teaching the dance. I just thought that this was a great piece for the parks. I also love the physical aspect of it, and I also agree that if there is something to be added to the effort, I would love it if participants were given some kind of a little handout that may list local clubs where they could continue learning to dance, instead of it just kind of being a one afternoon event and then they don't do it again. So I think that might be another way to expand the culture, the history and the knowledge and the audience participation.
Thank you, Terry Lou. Do we have any new, additional, or opposing comments?
I would just say that this was one of the videos that I watched all the way through. I really enjoyed. It was kind of unique watching the clogging, and it was very entertaining.
Thank you. Additional comments?
Yeah, this is Rhonda. I did too. It was very entertaining. I did watch the video as well. This is a very strong and interesting application. A couple of comments. I'd like to see maybe possibly a suggestion on the project expense, maybe using some of the promotional and marketing expenses and bringing them down to the in-kind and trying to find somebody that could donate that, and then using possibly those funds to market or bring in or take to homeschoolers and 4-H'ers. I see this as a wonderful program to get them involved. Many times homeschoolers aren't really brought into the as a target or an audience for community engagement. And this would be a wonderful program to do that. So I would suggest that possibly take some of those funds and see how we can bring in the 4-Hers, and those maybe 4-Hers could present this at the county fair too, and bring that in.
Thank you. Additional comments? I'll ask you then to please finalize your scores and update your online comments. Let me know if you need more time. This then concludes the Arts in the Parks and Historic Sites 2019 Individuals number 3 Advisory Review Panel. Thank you to all.